The crowd roared like a living beast as the gates of the alien colosseum opened wide. The sand was stained from countless battles, and the heat of the twin suns burned down on the arena floor. In the shadows, a tall figure stepped forward, chains clinking at his wrists. He was human, the only one of his kind in this place, and the audience had come to see him fight again. His name was Kale, once a soldier on a distant frontier world. He had been captured during a war he never understood, traded like a prize between alien warlords. Now he was here in the Emperor's city, fighting for the amusement of 1,000 strange eyes. Yet every step he took was heavy with something more than survival. Every fight brought him closer to a goal no one in the crowd could see. The alien warriors he faced were taller, stronger, and bred for the arena. Some had scales, some had tusks, and some had weapons fused into their very bodies. The rules were simple: kill or be killed. But Kale never forgot the face that had given him the will to keep going. High above, on a throne carved from black stone, the Emperor's daughter watched, her eyes following his every move. She was unlike the others. Her beauty was sharp, otherworldly, framed by horns that curved elegantly above her head. While the crowd laughed and shouted for blood, she sat still, her expression unreadable. Some said she found the human curious. Others whispered she had seen something in him the day he first fought, a spark that made him different from the rest. Kale's chains were removed, and the arena guards shoved a heavy spear into his hands. His opponent today was a giant alien beast with 4 arms and a hide like living armor. The crowd cheered louder, smelling blood before the fight began. Kale's breathing slowed. He knew that in this place, fear was death, but patience could be victory. The gates clanged shut behind the beast, and it let out a deep growl that shook the ground. It charged, its steps heavy enough to leave dents in the sand. Kale moved sideways, avoiding the first strike, but the beast's claws scraped his arm. The pain was sharp, but he didn't flinch. Every second counted. Every movement was part of a plan he had been building since the day he was thrown into this pit. The princess leaned forward slightly, her gaze locked on the human. No one around her noticed, but she was studying him closely. She had seen warriors win by brute force, but this one fought differently. He was calculating, letting his enemy waste its strength. He moved with purpose, and when he struck, it was always precise. As the beast lunged again, Kale rolled beneath its massive frame and drove the spear deep into the joint of its leg. The crowd roared, half in excitement, half in rage. The beast screamed, stumbling to one knee. Kale didn't stop. He used the moment to twist the weapon free and drive it into the creature's throat. Silence hit the arena for one long heartbeat. Before the stands erupted in chaos, Kale stood over the fallen beast, chest heaving, eyes searching the stands until they found hers. For a moment, their gazes met across the distance. Neither looked away. And in that silent exchange, something unspoken passed between them, a promise, a challenge, and perhaps the beginning of something far greater than survival. The scent of blood still lingered in the air as Kale was led back through the dark tunnels beneath the arena. The roar of the crowd faded behind stone walls, replaced by the echo of boots and chains. He felt the ache in his muscles and the sting of his wounds, but his mind was already working, thinking of the next fight. The path to freedom was long, and every victory was just another step toward it. The guards who escorted him were not friendly. They looked at him with the same contempt they had shown from the first day. To them, he was nothing more than entertainment, a living weapon to be used until broken. Yet Kale had seen their fear too. Even these hardened soldiers whispered about the human who fought like no other, the man who never bowed his head after a match. He was taken to a chamber where healers waited. Alien hands tended to his injuries, their touch efficient but without kindness. Strange herbs were pressed into cuts, and glowing ointments sealed the wounds. He sat still, his eyes scanning the room. Every corner, every door, every possible way out was memorized. Freedom would not come in a single day, but every detail was a piece of the puzzle. When the healers left, a shadow moved near the doorway. It was her. The Emperor's daughter stepped inside without a word, her golden armor glinting in the torchlight. Kale rose to his feet, not out of respect for her station, but because she had the presence of someone who demanded attention. Her gaze met his, and for a long moment, neither spoke. "You fight differently," she said at last, her voice calm yet edged with curiosity. "You watch before you strike. You endure before you kill." Kale said nothing, studying her as she studied him. In this city, words were dangerous, but silence could hold power too. The princess did not seem offended. Instead, she stepped closer, her eyes sharp as if measuring his worth. "There are those who wish to see you dead in the next match," she continued. "And there are those who would rather see you win." Her tone made it clear she was among the latter, though she did not explain why. Kale wondered what game she was playing, but he kept his thoughts hidden. In this place, every truth was a weapon, and he could not yet decide if she was ally or enemy. The sound of approaching boots ended the moment. A captain entered, bowing to the princess before glaring at Kale. "The Emperor has decided," the captain said. "Tomorrow you fight the Blade Serpent." Kale had heard the name. It was no ordinary creature, but a predator from the deep desert, fast and armored with scales sharper than steel. Few had survived facing it, and none without paying a heavy price. The princess gave no sign of fear or pity. She only looked at Kale one last time before turning to leave. "If you want to live, remember what I said," she told him, her voice low enough that only he could hear. Then she was gone, leaving Kale in the silence of the chamber, the torchlight flickering against the stone walls. He could not yet see the path ahead, but he felt it shifting with every step she took. That night, the barracks were restless. Other gladiators spoke of the Blade Serpent in hushed voices, warning that its speed made it impossible to predict. Kale lay awake on the hard bed, staring at the ceiling. He did not fear death, but he refused to die in chains. Tomorrow was not just another fight. It was a test, and perhaps the first real chance to prove that the human in the arena was more than a pawn in their games. Morning came with the sound of drums and the scent of dust rising from the arena floor. Kale was led once again into the tunnels, his hands gripping the spear given to him. The gates loomed ahead, and beyond them waited the creature that had ended so many lives. Somewhere high above, the princess would be watching, her eyes on him, as they had been before. He stepped forward without hesitation, ready to face whatever came through those gates. The gates opened with a deep metallic groan, and the sudden burst of sunlight blinded Kale for a moment. The noise of the crowd crashed into him like a wave, their voices mixing in cheers, jeers, and chants. He stepped forward into the arena, the sand crunching under his boots. The scent of heat and dust filled the air, carrying with it the faint metallic tang of blood from past battles. The opposite gate rattled, chains snapping free as something massive shifted behind it. The crowd grew louder, sensing the arrival of the Blade Serpent. Kale tightened his grip on the spear, adjusting his stance. He did not look at the stands, though he knew exactly where the princess would be sitting. She was watching. She always watched. The gate rose and the creature slithered out, its long body shimmering with overlapping scales. Each one was sharp enough to cut through armor, glinting in the light like 1,000 blades. Its head was narrow and cruel, eyes bright with hunger, tongue flickering in and out. The Blade Serpent moved with unnatural speed, its body coiling and uncoiling across the sand as it studied its prey. Kale circled slowly, keeping his spear between himself and the serpent. Every movement mattered. One mistake and the fight would be over. The serpent struck suddenly, its head darting forward with blinding speed. Kale twisted aside, feeling the rush of air as its jaws snapped shut where he had been standing. He slashed with the spear, the blade scraping across the serpent's scales without breaking through. The crowd erupted in excitement at the near miss. Cale's mind stayed calm, his breathing steady. The serpent lunged again, and this time he stepped in instead of away, driving the spear toward its eye. The serpent jerked its head at the last second, and the spear tip grazed its cheek. A small cut appeared, and the crowd roared even louder. Blood had been drawn, and now the creature would be furious. It came at him with relentless speed, striking from different angles, forcing him to block and dodge again and again. His arms ached, and the sand beneath his feet shifted dangerously, threatening to unbalance him. The serpent's tail whipped around, catching his side and sending him staggering. Pain flared through his ribs, but he forced himself upright. Losing focus meant death. High above, the princess leaned forward in her throne. Her eyes tracked every movement, and her hands gripped the armrests as if she were in the fight herself. Around her, the nobles laughed and placed wagers, none believing the human could survive. She said nothing, but her gaze never left Cale, as if willing him to endure. Cale adjusted his grip, shifting to hold the spear closer to the blade. The serpent lunged again, and this time he sidestepped and drove the weapon deep into the soft flesh beneath its jaw. The serpent thrashed violently, its coils whipping the sand into clouds. Cale held on, twisting the blade deeper until the serpent's movements slowed. With a final shudder, the blade serpent collapsed onto the sand. The arena went silent for a heartbeat, as if no one could believe what they had seen. Then the sound returned all at once, a deafening roar that shook the walls. Cale pulled the spear free and stood over the fallen creature, chest heaving, blood dripping from the blade. He did not raise his arms in victory. He only looked toward the princess. There, eyes met again across the distance, and something unspoken passed between them. She gave the faintest nod, almost too small for anyone else to notice. It was not approval alone, it was a signal, a promise that his victories were not going unseen. Cale turned away from the serpent's body and walked toward the gate, the sound of the crowd echoing behind him like a storm. The corridors beneath the arena felt colder than usual as Cale returned from the fight. The air was heavy with the smell of blood and damp stone. The guards stayed silent, their usual smirks gone. Even they knew the blade serpent had claimed more lives than they could count. Yet the human had stood over its corpse and walked away. He was taken to the barracks, but his rest was brief. A messenger arrived before nightfall, summoning him to the upper halls of the Emperor's palace. It was the first time since his capture that Cale had been called anywhere beyond the arena or the cells. The guards chained his wrists again, though he could tell their grip was tighter than before. They feared what he could do if given the chance. The palace halls were lit with golden lanterns, casting warm light across towering walls carved with alien symbols. Servants moved quietly, bowing low as the guards passed. Cale's eyes never stopped moving, tracing the positions of doors, guards, and weapons. Every new place was a map to store in his mind, every step another piece in the puzzle of escape. Finally, he was brought into a great chamber lined with pillars of black marble. At the far end sat the Emperor himself, a towering figure with sharp features and eyes like burning embers. Beside him, in her usual seat, was the princess. Her gaze was calm but alert, fixed on Cale as he was forced to kneel. The chamber was silent except for the echo of the guards' boots. "You fought well," the Emperor said, his voice deep and commanding. "Few have bested the blade serpent. Even fewer have done so without fear." His words were not praise alone, they were a challenge. Cale met the Emperor's stare without flinching, knowing any sign of weakness would be remembered. The princess glanced between them, her expression unreadable. The Emperor leaned forward. "You fight for survival." But survival alone is not enough. The next battle will test more than your strength. It will test your will. His tone made it clear that this was not a choice. Cale gave a single nod, his mind already wondering what creature or warrior they would pit against him next. The princess's eyes softened for the briefest moment before the emperor waved his hand. The guards led Cale away, back through the winding halls toward the barracks. The faint hum of the city's energy lines buzzed through the walls. He passed other gladiators, their faces marked by scars and hopelessness. Yet some looked at him differently now. Whispers followed him, carrying both admiration and disbelief. To them, the human was no longer just a prisoner, he was a possibility. That night, the princess came to the barracks. She wore a cloak that hid her armor, and the guards at her side kept their distance. She stopped in front of Cale's cell, her voice low but steady. The emperor will not let you win forever. Each victory makes you more dangerous in his eyes. You must be careful. Her gaze was intense, as if she were trying to make him see the danger beyond the arena. Cale stepped closer to the bars. Then why warn me? He asked. The princess's lips curved slightly, though it was not quite a smile. Because I do not believe you belong in chains, she said. Her words carried a weight he could not yet measure. Before he could speak again, she turned and left, her cloak trailing behind her as the guards followed. The faint sound of her steps faded into the distance. When dawn came, the city awoke to the sound of drums once more. Cale stood ready in the tunnels beneath the arena, his spear in hand. The crowd above was louder than ever, eager to see what challenge the emperor had chosen for him. Somewhere in the stands, the princess would be watching, her eyes searching for something beyond the fight. Cale stepped toward the gates, knowing the next battle might decide far more than victory or defeat. The gates creaked open once more, revealing the blinding light of the arena. The air was thick with heat, and the sound of the crowd rolled like thunder across the sands. Cale stepped forward, his eyes scanning the arena floor. He could feel the tension in the air, the way the audience leaned forward in anticipation. This was no ordinary fight. The emperor wanted a spectacle. Across the arena, a second gate opened. From the shadows emerged a massive warrior, towering even over the largest of the alien guards. His skin was a deep metallic hue, and heavy armor covered him from neck to knee. In his hands he carried a warhammer so large it seemed to bend the air around it. This was no beast, but a champion, one of the emperor's own chosen fighters. Cale studied him carefully. The man's steps were deliberate, his eyes focused like a predator sizing up prey. The crowd began to chant the warrior's name, their voices shaking the arena walls. Cale's grip tightened on his spear. He knew brute strength would not be enough to defeat someone like this. He would have to be faster, smarter, and patient enough to wait for the one mistake that could change everything. The emperor sat high above, his expression unreadable. Beside him, the princess leaned forward, her gaze fixed on the sand below. Her hands rested lightly on the railing, but her posture was tense. She did not speak, yet her eyes followed every movement Cale made. She had warned him the night before, and now he understood why. This was a fight meant to break him. The warrior struck first, swinging the warhammer with a speed that belied its size. Cale leapt back, the hammer slamming into the sand with a force that sent dust flying into the air. The ground shook beneath his feet, but he did not falter. He moved in a wide arc, forcing the warrior to turn and follow. Every turn, every step cost the larger man just a little more energy. They circled each other, weapons poised. The warrior charged, bringing the hammer down in a brutal overhead strike. Cale sidestepped, feeling the rush of wind as the weapon smashed into the ground. Without hesitation, Cale lunged, driving the spear toward the gap between the warrior's armor plates. The tip struck, but the armor held, deflecting the blow with a sharp clang. The crowd roared at the exchange, their excitement growing. The warrior snarled and swung again, the hammer's head passing so close to Kale's ribs that he felt the air ripple. Kale ducked low, rolling across the sand to create distance. His breathing was steady, but he could feel the strain in his arms and legs. The fight was a test of endurance as much as skill. From the stands, the princess's eyes never left him. She could see what the crowd could not, the way Kale was reading his opponent, waiting for the moment when strength would turn into fatigue. The warrior's swings were powerful but draining. Every missed strike pulled more from his reserves. Kale was drawing the fight out, forcing him to tire. The moment came when the warrior lifted the hammer for another crushing blow, but his stance faltered. Kale saw the opening and moved instantly, darting forward and thrusting the spear beneath the arm plate. The blade sank deep, and the warrior staggered, roaring in pain. Kale twisted the weapon free and struck again, this time forcing the warrior to his knees. Silence hung over the arena for a breath before the crowd exploded in noise. The champion had fallen, and the human stood over him, battered but unbroken. Kale pulled the spear back, stepping away as the warrior collapsed face first into the sand. He looked toward the emperor's throne, his eyes steady. The emperor stared back without expression, but the princess's lips curved in the faintest hint of approval. The gates opened behind him, and Kale walked toward them without raising his weapon in victory. His steps were slow, not from weakness, but from control. He knew the fight was only part of a larger game, one that extended beyond the blood and sand. And somewhere deep inside, he knew the next move would not be made in the arena alone. The barracks were unusually quiet when Kale returned after defeating the emperor's champion. The other gladiators avoided his gaze, not out of hatred, but out of something closer to respect. They had seen fighters win, but not like this. Kale's victories were different. He fought with purpose, and that unsettled those who had long accepted their fates. That night, Kale lay on the hard bed staring at the ceiling. Every muscle ached, but his mind refused to rest. The princess's warning still echoed in his thoughts. The emperor would not stop sending greater challenges. Each victory was a step forward, but it was also a step closer to becoming too dangerous. In the emperor's eyes, the day would come when his survival was no longer allowed. Before dawn, the sound of footsteps woke him. The door to his cell opened, and the princess stepped inside, with only one guard behind her. She was cloaked in deep blue fabric, her golden armor hidden beneath. Her eyes were sharp, and she spoke in a low voice. "You cannot keep winning and expect to live. If you want freedom, there is another way." Her tone carried both urgency and risk. Kale stood, his chains clinking as he moved. "And why would you help me?" he asked. Her expression did not change. "Because your fight has become more than entertainment. It has become a spark. People talk about you in the markets, in the halls, even among the guards. If you survive long enough, you could change more than your own fate." Her words were careful, but the weight behind them was clear. She told him of a secret passage that led from the arena tunnels to the outer walls. It was rarely guarded, meant only for emergencies. The path could be used during the chaos of a major event. "The Emperor's festival is in 2 days," she said. "The arena will be at its loudest. If you win the next fight, the distraction will give you a chance." Her eyes locked with his as she added, "But if you fail, you will not leave this place alive." Kale considered her plan. Trust was dangerous, but so was doing nothing. Every instinct told him the Emperor's patience would end soon. "Then I'll win the next fight," he said. "And I'll take the passage." The princess gave a short nod, her eyes holding something almost like pride, before she turned to leave. The guard followed her out, and the cell door shut with a heavy clang. The next day, the arena was packed beyond its usual numbers. The Emperor's voice echoed across the stands, announcing a battle unlike any before. Kale's opponent was not a beast or a single warrior, but 3 armored fighters known as the Triumvirate. They were famous for their coordination, each one moving as part of a single deadly unit. The crowd roared at the announcement, eager. For a brutal show, the gates opened and Kale stepped onto the sand. The Triumvirate entered from the opposite side, their weapons gleaming in the sunlight. One carried a long sword, another wielded twin axes, and the third bore a curved blade, shaped like a crescent moon. They fanned out, surrounding Kale in a slow, deliberate circle. He kept his eyes moving, tracking their positions, waiting for the first strike. The fighter with the long sword lunged, and Kale deflected the blow with his spear. The second came in from the side, swinging an axe toward his ribs. Kale spun away, using the movement to jab at the third before they could close the gap. The sand shifted under his feet, and each strike rang out like a drumbeat, fast and relentless. They fought as one, but Kale fought to break their unity. He baited them into overextending, forcing one to move too far from the others. When the gap appeared, he struck hard, driving the spear into the sword wielder's side. The fighter fell, and the crowd roared with surprise. The remaining 2 came at him in a fury, but their coordination faltered without their third. Kale pressed the attack, forcing them back until the last one dropped to the sand in defeat. The arena shook with the sound of the crowd's cheers. Kale stood in the center, breathing hard, blood streaking his armor. High above the princess's eyes met his, and she gave a small, deliberate nod. The plan was set in motion. The festival was near, and with it, the chance for freedom. Kale turned toward the gates, already seeing not just the path out of the arena, but the path out of chains. The city was alive with celebration on the day of the Emperor's festival. Bright banners hung from every tower, and the streets were filled with music and the scent of roasting meats. In the arena, the crowd's roar was louder than Kale had ever heard. Every seat was taken. Nobles and commoners alike gathered to watch the grand event. For them, the festival was a time of joy. For Kale, it was the moment he had been preparing for. The princess's words stayed sharp in his mind. Win the fight, take the passage, and vanish into the chaos. He had studied the arena tunnels for weeks, memorizing every corner and shadow. The guards would be distracted by the size of the crowd, and the noise would hide his movements. But first, he had to survive whatever the Emperor had planned for his final performance. When the gates opened, Kale stepped into the arena and was met with a sight that drew a wave of shock from the audience. His opponent was not one fighter or even a group. It was a massive beast unlike anything he had faced before. Its body was covered in dark spiked armor, its 6 legs moving with terrifying speed. Its head was low to the ground, and its jaws dripped with venom that hissed when it touched the sand. The Emperor stood from his throne and raised his hands, letting the noise of the crowd fall to silence. For the glory of the festival, he declared, the human will face the devourer. The name alone sent murmurs through the stands. Even Kale had heard stories of the beast, how it could tear apart a fully armed soldier in seconds. The princess did not speak, but her eyes were locked on Kale, her knuckles white against the railing. The fight began with a thunderous charge from the devourer. Its legs pounded the sand, sending vibrations through the ground. Kale sidestepped, his spear slashing at its flank, but the blow barely scratched the creature's armor. It spun with frightening speed, forcing him to dive away as its jaws snapped shut where he had been standing. Venom sprayed across the sand, burning through it like acid. Kale circled, searching for weaknesses. The creature's armor was nearly impenetrable, but its eyes were unprotected. Getting close enough to strike would be dangerous, yet it was the only way. The devourer lunged again, and Kale rolled beneath its massive frame, thrusting upward. The spear struck one of its joints, drawing a small spurt of dark blood. The crowd gasped, their cheers turning to frantic shouts. High above, The princess's lips moved in silent words. Cale could not hear, but he understood the meaning. She was urging him to stay alive. The beast turned, enraged, and charged again. Cale feinted left, then darted right, leading it toward the broken remains of an old pillar in the arena. At the last moment, he pivoted, letting the beast slam into the stone. The impact cracked its armor near the neck. Seizing the moment, Cale leapt onto its back, gripping the damaged plates for leverage. The beast bucked violently, trying to throw him off, but he drove the spear into the crack and pushed with all his strength. The weapon sank deep, and the devourer let out a piercing roar. Its legs faltered, its movements slowing as blood poured onto the sand. With one final thrust, Cale brought it down. The arena erupted in chaos. Some screamed in celebration, others in disbelief. Cale stood over the fallen beast, chest heaving, his armor slick with sweat and blood. He looked to the princess, and their eyes locked. She gave a sharp nod and turned, disappearing from view. That was the signal. It was time to move. The guards would open the gate for him to leave the arena, and he would take the hidden path she had told him about. As the gate clanged shut behind him, Cale slipped into the shadows of the tunnel instead of heading to the barracks. The noise of the festival was deafening even here, masking his steps. Every turn brought him closer to the outer wall and the passage to freedom. The final stretch lay ahead, but he knew the Emperor would not let his prize escape without a fight. The next moments would decide everything. The tunnel was narrow and damp, lit only by faint torches mounted far apart. Cale's footsteps were quick but silent, every movement guided by the memory of the princess's directions. The sound of the festival above still reached him faintly, like the distant rumble of a storm. Somewhere ahead lay the passage that would lead him beyond the walls of the city. Freedom was close, but danger was closer. The sound of armor clinking echoed from behind. Cale turned just in time to see 3 guards rushing into the tunnel, their weapons drawn. They were faster than he had hoped. The Emperor had sent them to cut him off before he could escape. Cale gripped his spear and braced himself. The narrow space meant they could not surround him, but it also meant there was no room to retreat. The first guard lunged, and Cale sidestepped, slamming the butt of his spear into the man's helmet. The second swung a curved blade, which Cale caught on the shaft before driving his knee into the guard's chest. The third tried to press in from behind, but the tight walls worked in Cale's favor. One by one, they fell, groaning in pain on the stone floor. He left them behind, pushing forward into the darkness. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, its walls carved with ancient markings. In the center stood the princess, her cloak pulled back to reveal her armor. She was alone, her expression tense but resolute. "You made it," she said, her voice low. "But there's no time. The final gate is ahead. Once you pass through, you will be outside the city. The Emperor will not follow you there." She stepped closer, her eyes fixed on his. Cale studied her face. "Why help me?" he asked again. This time, she answered without hesitation. "Because I have watched you fight for more than your own life. You fight for the will to be free, and I cannot see that crushed." Her voice carried no fear, only conviction. "Go, before the rest of his soldiers find us." She turned toward the far side of the chamber, pointing to a heavy stone door set into the wall. They moved together toward the door, but the sound of boots and shouting echoed from the tunnel behind them. More guards were coming. Cale gripped the spear tighter, ready to fight, but the princess stepped forward, drawing a slender sword from her side. "I will hold them," she said firmly. "You must go now." Cale hesitated, knowing that staying could mean both their deaths. But leaving her behind was a choice that burned in his chest. She looked at him with steady eyes. "If you fall here, everything you've done will be for nothing. Live, Cale. That is how you win." The shouts grew louder, and the glint of armor appeared at the tunnel entrance. Kale gave her a single nod, a silent promise that her risk would not be wasted. Then he turned and pushed against the heavy stone door with all his strength. The door opened to reveal the outside, world-rolling hills under a wide, open sky. The air was fresh, untainted by the scent of blood and sand. For a moment, Kale stood. Still, the weight of the arena falling away from his shoulders. Behind him, the clash of steel rang out as the princess met the guards head-on. Her voice rose once in a sharp command before the noise swallowed it. Kale stepped into the sunlight and began to run. Each stride carried him farther from the walls that had once held him, from the roars of the crowd, and from the chains that had bound him. But in his mind, the image of the princess standing in that chamber stayed sharp. She had given him this chance, and he would not waste it. He would live, and he would fight again, but on his own terms, far behind. The festival continued, and the emperor sat on his throne, unaware that the human who had entertained his empire was gone. Kale's shadow stretched long across the hills. As he ran, each step taking him deeper into the freedom he had earned. And though he did not look back, he carried with him the memory of the one who had watched his victories and made his escape possible.